towards a climate catastrophe? Watch WION's Climate Tracker, weekdays at 12 p.m. GMT, 5:30 p.m. IST.
You don't know how to fix the holes in our ozone layer. You don't know how to bring the salmon back up a dead stream. You don't know how to bring back an animal now extinct. And you can't bring back the forest that once grew where there is now a desert.
You have ignored us in the past and you will ignore us again. We have run out of excuses and we are running out of time.
Show us your faithfulness. Show us your trustworthiness. Show us your honesty. Prove us wrong. We desperately need you to prove us wrong. God help us all if you fail to prove us wrong. God help us.
One trillion species. 7.8 billion humans. 1.9 million species extinct. One planet. Where are we heading? What should we do? Watch Climate Tracker, only on WION. World is one.
Welcome back. Thanks very much for staying on with us here on Beyond World is One. You're watching our continuing coverage of the latest coming in from Ukraine. A quick look at the top stories we are tracking. Heavy fighting on the outskirts of Kharkiv, Ukraine's second largest city, which is close to the border with Russia, as the city's mayor asks the residents to seek shelter. With Russian missiles pounding Kiev, families take cover in shelters as authorities ask the residents to prepare Molotov cocktails to defend Ukraine's capital from an assault. Russian President Vladimir Putin calls on the Ukrainian army to overthrow the country's leadership, which he Nazis. President Joe Biden joins an emergency NATO summit to strengthen the frantic Western response to Russia's invasion of Ukraine and fears for the security of Europe. Due to resistance from key EU countries fearful of severing their power sources, resulted in the West holding off on banishing Moscow from the SWIFT banking transfer system. The International Olympic Committee, angry at the Russian invasion of Ukraine breaching the Olympic truce, urges all international sports federations to cancel their forthcoming events in Russia.
Риски в сфере безопасности создали такие, что другими средствами отреагировать было невозможно.
Ми не боїмось нічого. Не боїмось, захищаючи нашу державу.
This continues. The pain will continue, the pain will grow.
He must and he will fail.
Putin is the aggressor. Putin chose this war.
This hideous and barbarous venture of Vladimir Putin must end in failure.
A lot is happening in Ukraine right now following that full-scale Russian attack. If you're joining us right now, here is where things stand. The Russian President Vladimir Putin has called on the Ukrainian military to seize power from their own government. The Russian Defense Ministry has said its forces have taken control of the key Gostomel airfield near Kiev. It claims 200 troops from Ukraine's special units were killed. Meanwhile, Ukraine says more than 1,000 Russians have died since the invasion. The Ukrainian military vehicles have entered Kiev to defend the city against approaching Russian troops. Nearly 18,000 guns have been given to the volunteers alongside instructions to make Molotov cocktails. Meanwhile, the Kremlin says Russia is ready for talks with Ukraine in Minsk. This comes after Zelensky's proposal asking Vladimir Putin to sit down and talk. The focus on the talks would be on Ukraine declaring a neutral status. But there is no evidence Ukraine would agree to talks on this basis. On the other hand, the European Union has agreed to freeze Putin and Lavrov's assets. This comes after the second wave of sanctions against Russia that were announced. The European Union has said that Vladimir Putin was looking to destroy Ukraine and that his actions were comparable to those of the Nazis in World War II. Poland is currently preparing to close its airspace to Russian airlines. The UN Refugee Agency estimating around 100,000 people are already displaced, but believes up to 5 million could try to flee the country as the invasion continues. Russian missiles pounded Kiev. Families ran for cover in shelters. Authorities told residents to prepare Molotov cocktails, all to defend Ukraine's capital from a Russian assault. In the latest, the city's mayor confirming that Russians have entered the capital. Fears are now on the rise that Kiev could fall on the second day of the Russian invasion. Ukraine military forces were seen on the streets of the capital. Currently, Ukrainian troops are defending their positions on all four fronts of the city despite being heavily outnumbered. Some 18,000 guns with ammunition have been distributed to reservists in the Kiev region alone. The country has banned all male citizens from 18 to 60 years old leaving the country, asking them to join the army and defend the country. Some Kiev residents even answered the Ukrainian Defense Ministry's call by taking up arms to defend their capital. Meanwhile, thousands took refuge in shelters in the capital as air raid sirens wailed over the city of 3 million people. Some residents even took refuge in the city's subway stations. People in Kiev were told to make Molotov cocktail petrol bombs as they hid in the makeshift shelters and basements. Ukraine's foreign minister says that Kiev has not experienced anything like this since the 1941 Nazi attack. U.S. officials believe Russia's initial aim is to topple Volodymyr Zelensky and decapitate his government. Zelensky said that he understood Russian troops were coming for him, but vowed to stay in the capital.
За наявною у нас інформацією, ворог позначив мене як ціль номер 1. Мою родину як ціль номер 2. Вони хочуть знищити Україну політично, знищивши главу держави.
Meanwhile, hundreds of residents tried to flee the capital via trains. The military was seen firing shots in the air to disperse crowds at the train stations. Across Ukraine, Russian missiles continue to pound cities. Mariupol on the Sea of Azov, Kharkiv in northeast, Kiev, the capital, Odessa in the south, Chernobyl, which has been captured now by the Russians. Our correspondent Giles Gibson getting us this report on the Russian invasion from Moscow.
The situation in the city is looking increasingly dire. We are getting lots of reports now about explosions as well as gunfire being heard right in the historic city centre of Kyiv. Also, so many photos, videos coming out of the city showing the damage to buildings, including residential buildings, from these missiles that have just been pounding the city for hours and hours now. We've also been hearing from the Russian Ministry of Defense here in Moscow saying that they have actually taken the western side of Kiev, blocked, in their words, the western side of Kiev, which is the closest side to Poland and the European Union. The Russian Ministry of Defense also saying that they have taken a critical airport just outside of the Ukrainian capital. Of course, with Russian troops now appearing to encircle the Ukrainian capital, there is a lot of concern and a lot of questions about where Volodymyr Zelensky, the Ukrainian president, is. He has said in the last few hours that he's going to be staying in the Ukrainian capital. We've had reports at this stage, unconfirmed, that he has actually moved to a bunker as Russian troops get closer and closer.
With us on the broadcast this minute is Ben Friedman from Boston. He is the policy director at Defense Priorities, a think tank based there in the United States. Thanks very much for speaking with us. Help us better understand your assessment of how sanctions, series of diplomatic efforts, statements of condemnation have failed to deter Russia from going this far. Kiev now could also be taken over by the Russian troops, is what the assessments are saying at this point. To what extent has the West been able to fulfill its promise to protect Ukraine, according to you?
Well, the West didn't have the promise to protect Ukraine. If we did, Ukraine would have been a member of NATO, which would have meant we were legally guaranteeing its security and saying we would defend it, and we don't. People, the Secretary of State, the President of the United States, various leaders here have said a lot of things that say they support Ukraine, but they never quite said we're going to fight for it, and that's a big difference. So the only thing I think that would have deterred Russia from starting this war on Ukraine would be a Ukrainian military that was more capable, because it's been clear from the get-go that no one would come to Ukraine's aid in the event Russia attacked it. So it's really on Ukraine, and it's tragic, but they just don't have, I think, a military. I think it's overperformed what a lot of people expected so far, it seems, but they really don't have the ability to stand up to Russia. That's the tragic reality here.
Right. What do you make of the Russian claim to this point that they have been ready for dialogue, even as that full-scale attack on Ukraine continued?
Well, clearly, the Russians, to the extent they were indulging in dialogue, ran out of patience with it, either because they thought under present circumstances they were never going to get what they wanted from the government in Kyiv, from Zelensky, and the Zelensky government had not really implemented the Minsk II Accords. That's contentious, but I think that's accurate, which is what Russia wanted. And, of course, they had not declared that they would be neutral between NATO and Russia. So I think those were the two big things Russia probably wanted, and they didn't get them, and they ran out of patience. Now, they wanted things from the United States and NATO, too. But I think, it's not – I don't think it's fair to say that Russia had no desire for dialogue. They did engage in dialogue, but at the end of the day, they gave up on diplomacy and invaded. And so the war is their responsibility and their doing.
To what extent is this the responsibility of the United States? Would you blame the efforts that have been made by the West, the NATO, the EU at all?
Well, I will be careful in the language I choose here. So what I would say is that Russia is guilty of starting this war. Russia is culpable, and the blame goes squarely to them. That being said, I think that the policies of the United States and also NATO have been negligent in designing policies towards Ukraine that were not helpful in the long run to Ukraine. And those policies include refusing to close the open door to NATO, which, whatever you think about it, was one of the things that Russia cited as a major grievance. And besides that, encouraging the Ukrainian government to sort of stand firm and not capitulate to Russia and cut a deal before the war that they didn't want to. So maybe the Ukrainian government wouldn't have done what Russia wanted under any circumstance, but I think we have a responsibility, or had a responsibility, the United States, to push them that way and say clearly to them, look, we're not going to be defending you. You cannot count on us. You should make decisions on that basis. And in that sense, I think we failed them, and we have some moral accounting to do here too.
Right. What does this mean when it comes to the kind of responsibility that the West will have to take when it comes to the far-reaching implications, the humanitarian fallout as well?
Well, the West, I think, should be prepared to accept refugees. I hope the United States will move legally to make it easy for Ukrainian refugees to come here. I don't know that we will, but I hope we do. And I think we have a responsibility to say that this was an act of aggression and condemn it, but I think stopping it is just sort of beyond our power, or at least beyond our power on a rational basis. We just can't start World War III, or at least we ought not to, and that's what it would take at this point to defend Ukraine. So our moral responsibilities simply aren't going to save Ukraine, even though they might help Ukrainian people after the war, assuming they can get out and immigrate.
Ben, thanks very much for being here on Beyond World is One. As we continue to monitor the latest coming in from Ukraine, thousands of Ukrainians crossed into Poland, Romania, Hungary, as well as Slovakia as Russian missiles pounded the capital, Kiev. Most of the Ukrainians fleeing the country were women and children, as men of fighting age were told to remain behind. Mariana is one of the thousands who have fled Ukraine, crossed into Slovakia, struggling to hold back tears at the border. She has one message. She has called for peace.
Через воєнний стан у нас всі військовозобов'язані, всі чоловіки повинні воювати за країну, щоб був мир, щоб не наступали ворожі сили і все було в нас добре. Ми мусимо з дітьми виїжджати з України.
At the Polish border, many waited for hours in freezing conditions to leave Ukraine. Poland has the region's largest Ukrainian community of around 1 million people. Authorities said that the waiting time to cross the border ranged from 6 to 12 hours in some places. For those who crossed the border, they were offered free transport. Polish locals rushed to help Ukrainians move to the western cities in the country. In Moldova, the scenes were similar. Authorities set up 2 humanitarian centers in the northern villages where refugees from Ukraine are being offered basic aid for 72 hours. Medical staff and social workers are also available here. Authorities said that those arriving from Ukraine will not need to show COVID-19 passes, while minors just need to show a birth certificate. Neighboring Romania is also witnessing an influx of refugees from Ukraine. Over 10,000 Ukrainians have entered Romania through its 6 border checkpoints.
I'm from Kiev. I traveled with my family to Western Ukraine just for vacation when it happened. So we decided yesterday that we want to leave the country because it's not clear what will be happening. I have a lot of my relatives in Kiev who are sitting in the bomb shelters right now because there is a bombing everywhere and people are afraid and scared. So we want to leave Ukraine right now, but I think that there is no possibility for men to leave. So we need to decide. I have a 5-year-old kid and I have also my sister who has 2 kids. So we are really scared and don't know what will happen here.
The United Nations has called on European countries to keep their borders open for the displaced Ukrainians. According to the UN Refugee Agency, around 100,000 people have already fled within Ukraine. It says that invasion could further drive 5 million Ukrainians to flee overseas.
So we have reported that we've seen, we're aware of reports of substantial movement within Ukraine, but also across borders. So our latest understanding of this is that there are more than 100,000 people who we estimate to have left their homes and may be displaced inside the country. And we're also aware of several thousand who have crossed international borders in the region.
The Indian External Affairs Minister S. Jaishankar held talks with his Ukrainian counterpart as the conflict rages on in Eastern Europe. During the conversation, S. Jaishankar highlighted the plight of the Indians stuck in Ukraine, especially the students. The Indian minister said that he had received a call from Kuleba, who then shared his assessment of the current situation in Ukraine. S. Jaishankar also appreciated his counterpart's support for the safe return of Indians still stuck in Ukraine and emphasized on India's support for diplomacy and dialogue as the way out of this crisis. The call came ahead of the crucial vote at the UN Security Council on the Russian attack on Ukraine, talking about which the Ukrainian foreign minister said that he asked India to use all influence in its relations with Russia to force it to cease military aggression against Ukraine. Kuleba also urged India as a non-permanent UNSC member to support the draft resolution on restoring peace in Ukraine. The phone call comes a day after the Indian Prime Minister spoke to the Russian President Vladimir Putin. During the phone call, Prime Minister Modi appealed for an immediate cessation of the violence. He also conveyed that New Delhi attaches the highest priority to their safe exit and return to India. Meanwhile, New Delhi has said that it is establishing an evacuation route from Romania as well as Hungary. Sources said that the national carrier Air India will assist in the evacuation of Indian nationals from the neighboring countries. 2 flights will be leaving for Romania in the coming hours, and another is being planned on Saturday from Budapest. The first batch of Indian students crossed the Ukraine-Romania border. As per the latest advisory, New Delhi has urged students near the Ukrainian borders with Hungary and Romania to coordinate with the Ministry of External Affairs and depart in an organized manner. Students have been advised to stay in touch with the helpline numbers that have been set up at respective checkpoints. The Indian Embassy in Kiev has requested for the Indian flag printouts to be pasted on vehicles and buses while traveling. Earlier, the Indian Foreign Ministry announced that around 15,000 Indians are still stuck in Ukraine. Our principal diplomatic correspondent, Siddhant Sibil, spoke with Romania's envoy to India, who shared how Romania is assisting in arranging safe return for the Indians stuck in Ukraine. Let's take a listen in.
Our foreign minister has spoken to your foreign minister. There are plans to bring Indian students from your country. Your country will be giving refuge to these students who will cross the border checkpoints. There are Indian teams going there. If you can give us the details, how you're hosting the Indian students and also your country's role in their evacuation.
Actually, it's right. Yesterday evening, the Minister Jai Shankar spoke at the phone with Minister Bogdan Aurescu, and they convened that Romania will give its full support to the Indian students crossing the border into our country. Actually, there are consular teams from India, probably which already reached the border with Ukraine in the north of the country, and they will help the students to reach Bucharest. And from Bucharest, there will be flights from India, organized by the Indian government. Romanian government offered support for a couple of days with food accommodation for the students coming from, I mean, not only students, the Indian citizens coming from Ukraine, but we also have to prepare for a longer stay of refugees from Ukraine, because Indian citizens will be taken care by the Indian government. We are in full support of them. We will help them, as I have said, for a couple of days. But for longer term, probably we'll have to prepare for support and humanitarian assistance for the Ukrainian refugees. If the crisis will continue, they might have to stay longer in our countries.
With that, it's a wrap on this edition. We are taking a breather at this point, but stay tuned to WION World is One as we continue to get you the latest coming in from Ukraine following that full-scale Russian attack.
India's Global Voice, the channel that brings you the biggest stories from across.
अरे गया नहीं अभी तक? गाड़ी की सर्विस कब से ड्यू है यार? ये थोड़ी जाएंगे कहीं. ये तो गाड़ी की सर्विस करवाने के लिए कहीं जाने की जरूरत नहीं है. चिल, कोई गड़बड़ नहीं है. गो मैकेनिक पर पाए एक्सपर्ट कार सर्विसेज, 50 पॉइंट इंस्पेक्शन और 3 महीने की अनकंडीशनल वारंटी. डाउनलोड करें इंडिया का नंबर 1 कार सर्विसेज ऐप गो मैकेनिक.
Go mechanic.
अरे गया नहीं अभी तक? गाड़ी की सर्विस कब से ड्यू है यार? ये थोड़ी जाएंगे कहीं. ये तो गाड़ी की सर्विस करवाने के लिए कहीं जाने की जरूरत नहीं है. चिल, कोई गड़बड़ नहीं है. गो मैकेनिक पर पाए एक्सपर्ट कार सर्विसेज, 50 पॉइंट इंस्पेक्शन और 3 महीने की अनकंडीशनल वारंटी. डाउनलोड करें इंडिया का नंबर 1 कार सर्विसेज ऐप गो मैकेनिक.
Go mechanic.
Joe Biden, now the 46th president of the United States, has a full plate in front of him.
Afghanistan has been the heart of American military power.
In a clear warning to China, India's military has now taken control of the country for 1 year.
Made it absurd. It says that it's likely to miss by
What was happening inside the virology lab in Wuhan?
One ship was able to freeze global trade.
We want love, we want peace, we want equality.
There are
A traditional recipe, and it's really very delicious.
It's code red for humanity. The alarm bells are deafening. Wildfires, floods, and hurricanes. Extreme climate events warn of impending doom. Is the world heading towards a climate catastrophe? Watch WION's Climate Tracker, weekdays at 12 p.m. GMT, 5:30 p.m. IST.
You don't know how to fix the holes in our ozone layer. You don't know how to bring the salmon back up a dead stream. You don't know how to bring back an animal now extinct. And you can't bring back the forest that once grew where there is now a desert.
You have ignored us in the past and you will ignore us again. You have run out of excuses and we are running out of time.
Show us your faithfulness. Show us your trustworthiness. Show us your honesty. Prove us wrong. We desperately need you to prove us wrong. God, help us all if you fail to prove us wrong. God, help us.
One trillion species. 7.8 billion humans. 1.9 million species extinct. One planet. Where are we heading? What should we do? Watch Climate Tracker, only on WION.
Welcome back. Thanks very much for staying on with us. I'm Molly Gambhir, and this is our continuing coverage of the latest coming in from Ukraine. A quick look first at the top stories. Ukrainian forces continue to fight Russian troops in the capital Kiev on the second day of the assault that has now claimed dozens of lives. Russian President Vladimir Putin calls on the Ukrainian army to remove its leadership in Kiev as the Russian military pushes closer to the Ukrainian capital. Ukraine's Interior Ministry says they are recording increased radiation levels from the site of the defunct Chernobyl nuclear power plant, which has been captured by the Russian forces. The Russian military claims it has taken control of an airport near Kiev as the Kremlin forces bear down on the Ukrainian capital. The European Union agrees to freeze European assets linked to Russian President Vladimir Putin and the Foreign Minister Sergei Lavrov.
Ми давно і до всього готові. Але причин для вашої безсонної ночі немає. Сьогодні від вас, від кожного з вас, потрібно спокій. По можливості залишайтесь, будь ласка, вдома. Ми працюємо. Армія працює. Працює весь сектор безпеки і оборони України. Кожен, хто має бойовий досвід і може приєднатися до оборони України, повинен негайно прибути до відповідних центрів комплектації. Цим ранком ми захищаємо нашу державу наодинці. Як і вчора, найпотужніші сили світу спостерігають здалеку. Чи переконали Росію вчорашні санкції? Ми чуємо у своєму небі і бачимо на своїй землі, що цього недостатньо. Чужі війська все ще намагаються активізуватись на нашій території.
That was Europe's wartime president, Volodymyr Zelensky. He ditched his suit for a sweatshirt, standing alone as his forces battled the Russian troops. Less than 4 years ago, Volodymyr Zelensky was leading a very different life. He was one of Ukraine's most popular comedians. He had a popular satirical television show. Today, he is the #1 target of the Russian army. He once starred in a sitcom called Servant of the People, where a history teacher gets elected as a president. Life imitated art, it seems, when the 44-year-old became president in 2019. Without any political experience, he won by a landslide, securing more than 73% of the ballots. Zelensky was born in a predominantly Russian-speaking industrial city in central Ukraine. He was born to Jewish parents, and his family was killed in the Nazi Holocaust. This is the same president Putin has accused of running a neo-Nazi regime. During his presidential bid, Zelensky called himself a political outsider. He was eager to shake up the establishment. His bid was focused on two main goals: break up the power of the oligarchs and end the war in the East. And now he finds himself as a president leading his country at war with Russia.
Коли бомби падають у Києві, це відбувається у Європі, не тільки в Україні. Коли ракети вбивають наших людей, це загибель всіх європейців. Вимагайте більше захисту для Європи, більше захисту для України як частини демократичного світу.
Ukraine's president finds himself as the #1 target of the Russian army, as many believe that Moscow seeks a regime change in the country. Zelensky says that he is currently target #1 of Russia, but says that he and his family remain in Ukraine. Ukraine's defunct Chernobyl nuclear power plant is now under Russian control. The world's worst nuclear accident site is still radioactive. Now, Ukraine's Nuclear Energy Regulatory Agency has reported increased radiation levels from the site. The nuclear agency and Ukraine's Interior Ministry detected higher than usual gamma radiation levels from around the decommissioned Chernobyl nuclear plant zone. Although they did not mention the exact radiation levels, the Ukrainian authorities have blamed the movement of heavy military equipment lifting radioactive dust into the air. But the Russian Defense Ministry has dismissed reports of higher radiation levels from the Chernobyl site. A Russian spokesperson has confirmed the safety of the radioactive site, stating that both Russian and Ukrainian personnel are taking care of the site's security.
С военнослужащими отдельного батальона охраны атомной электростанции Украины достигна договоренность о совместном обеспечении безопасности энергоблоков и саркофага Чернобыльской атомной электростанции. Радиоактивный фон в районе АЭС в норме. Персонал станции продолжает обслуживать объекты атомной электростанции в штатном режиме и отслеживает радиоактивную обстановку.
The still radioactive site, Chernobyl, lies some 100 kilometers from the Ukrainian capital. It is located on the shortest route from Belarus to the Ukrainian capital, Kiev. The power plant is also attributed to be a factor in the collapse of the Soviet Union. In April 1986, its fourth reactor exploded during a botched-up safety test, sending clouds of radiation billowing across much of Europe and even reached eastern United States. The catastrophe seems to have contributed to the collapse of the Soviet Union just a few years later. Ukraine's other reactors are not in the exclusion zones, but they contain nuclear fuel, which is a lot more radioactive. The risks of fighting around these reactors remain significantly higher. NATO leaders have convened a virtual summit to discuss the future course of action against Russia's invasion of Ukraine. The member states are arming up the borders of European countries on the east front.
We have warned against for months has come to pass, despite all our efforts to find a diplomatic solution. Moscow bears sole responsibility for the deliberate, cold-blooded and long-planned invasion. We condemn Russia's aggressions in the strongest possible terms and call on Russia to immediately cease its military action. We stand with the brave people of Ukraine. We fully support Ukraine's sovereignty and territorial integrity, its right of self-defense, and its right to choose its own path.
With a vow to defend every inch of NATO territory, the US has announced the deployment of an additional 7,000 troops to Germany to defend and reassure the NATO allies. But in the face of an invasion of Ukraine, Joe Biden has once again repeated that US forces will not engage in a conflict with Russia in Ukraine.
And now I'm authorizing additional U.S. force capabilities to deploy to Germany as part of NATO's response, including some of the U.S.-based forces that the Department of Defense placed on standby weeks ago. Let me say it again. Our forces are not and will not be engaged in the conflict with Russia in Ukraine. Our forces are not going to Europe to fight in Ukraine, but to defend our NATO allies and reassure those allies in the East.
2 American F-35 fighter jets have landed at the airbase in Romania as part of NATO's further bolstering of its eastern flank. Trucks carrying U.S. military vehicles have arrived at a military base near Constanta, a city at the Black Sea. Germany has deployed 3 more Eurofighter jets to Romania to support NATO's air policing mission. Berlin has deployed almost 1,000 troops in Lithuania as part of a German-led NATO combat unit and is taking part in NATO's air policing in Romania. Drone footage showing British troops arriving in Estonia. British Army can be seen transporting tanks and military equipment into Estonia as part of NATO's mission. The NATO ordered its military commanders to intensify their preparations to defend Allied territories, putting hundreds of warplanes and ships on alert and agreeing to increase troop numbers on its eastern flank. Italy has announced the supply of an additional 3,400 military personnel to support NATO efforts, and France is yet to decide their part of armed contribution to the alliance.
La nostra priorità oggi deve essere rafforzare la sicurezza del nostro continente e applicare la massima pressione sulla Russia perché ritiri le truppe e ritorni al tavolo dei negoziati.
Nous avons livré des équipements militaires et nous sommes toujours en train d'étudier les demandes qui viennent de nous être faites et nous allons statuer très rapidement.
As promised, the United States, European nations and their allies have imposed severe sanctions against Russia, hitting Russian banks, companies, individuals, imports, exports and oligarchs. But there is widespread fury against the countries that are blocking the heaviest potential sanctions against Moscow. The president of Ukraine has blamed Europe for being too slow to help. He has accused the Western allies of politicking as Moscow's forces advance on the capital city. Volodymyr Zelensky has urged Europe to act more quickly and forcefully in isolating Russia.
Європа має достатню силу, щоб зупинити цю агресію, щоб далі очікувати від європейських держав. Анулювання віз для росіян, відключення від СВІФТу, повна ізоляція Росії, відкликання послів, нафтове ембарго, закриття неба. Сьогодні все це має бути на столі, бо йдеться про загрозу нам, всій Європі. Ще можна зупинити агресію. Треба діяти без зволікань.
SWIFT is a global cooperative of financial institutions which allows cross-border payments. Blocking Russia from SWIFT would curb its ability to conduct international financial transactions completely. It is viewed as a potential nuclear option in the world of sanctions. But some of the European countries have denied taking this step. They've rejected it and pushed it to the last resort. For example, Germany.
Eine Aussetzung von SWIFT wäre technisch aufwendig vorzubereiten, hätte auch massive Auswirkungen auf den Zahlungsverkehr in Deutschland und für deutsche Unternehmen im Geschäft mit Russland, aber auch um Energielieferungszahlungen zu begleichen. Und das müsste gut vorbereitet sein. Es gab die Diskussion um das Thema SWIFT im vergangenen Herbst. Das wurde dann aufgrund der bestehenden technischen Einwände dann auch wieder vom Tisch genommen.
Both Germany and Italy are highly dependent on Russian natural gas, and cutting Russia off SWIFT would also impact the finances of some European countries. Apart from Germany and Italy, Austrian and French banks also have a lot of businesses in Russia. Then there are countries like Hungary and the Czech Republic, the leaders of which have a friendly relationship with the Russian president. Joe Biden tried to justify the decision by stating that American sanctions are as consequential as kicking Russia out of SWIFT. But he ended up saying that the rest of Europe is in opposition to such a move for now.
You didn't mention SWIFT in your sanctions that you announced. Is there a reason why the U.S. Isn't doing that? Is there a disagreement among allies?
The sanctions that we proposed on all their banks have of equal consequence, maybe more consequence than SWIFT, number one. Number two, it is always an option, but right now that's not the position that the rest of Europe wishes to take.
The West has imposed hard-hitting sanctions against Russia as it continues with its invasion of Ukraine. The EU, the UK, US targeting Russian banks and oligarchs. On this topic, our principal diplomatic correspondent, Siddhant Sibal, spoke with the European Union's envoy to New Delhi. Take a listen in.
Sanctions have been announced. More sanctions are expected. Do you think that these sanctions will make any impact on Moscow? Moscow has done so in the past. Georgia, for example, Crimea, for example. This time, what is different when it comes to the voice coming from the European Union?
Well, I definitely believe that the sanctions will have a very severe impact, will take a toll on Russian economy. Just yesterday, the European councillors come together and has elaborated a new
package of sanctions. These are broader than the previous ones following the aggression now. These sanctions include economic and financial aspects. For instance, we are going to forbid access to very relevant technology, which is required for the modernization of Russian economy. We are going to block access to the European financial markets. Russian banks will no longer be able to enter and operate into European financial markets. And then there are going to be new listings added to the previous ones to go and touch directly those who have been responsible for the aggression. So I think there is going to be a pretty significant package. And let me underscore, this is something we have prepared together with our friends and allies, with US, with UK, with Canada, and also with friends and partners from other regions, from Japan, for instance, or Australia. It's important we all work together in this direction and we make those responsible for the aggression accountable.
Let's talk about the people of Ukraine. With their worst nightmare coming true, thousands of citizens are trying to flee the country. Citizens who are left behind have taken to bomb shelters amid fears of rocket attacks overnight. Dozens slept in subway stations and bomb shelters, and the streets of several cities were left deserted.
This is a bomb shelter in Kiev, with streets being deserted and fire raining from the skies. Residents are huddled inside Kiev's designated bomb shelters to stay safe. A mother tries to calm her children, while sirens blare from the ground above. And another mother prepares hot drinks for everyone in the shelter, while children try to keep themselves busy and distracted from the war. This is an eyewitness video, shot at around 3:30 p.m. local time in Kiev. Air raid sirens can be heard, along with a government announcement asking all residents to take shelter. Dozens of families can be seen scrambling into one bomb shelter in the capital. This is another shelter in Kiev housing mostly students. This video, filmed by a Chinese student, shows students of the Arglia Kiev Institute of Music. All these students have taken refuge in an air raid shelter after the country descended into chaos. A Ukrainian-born dancer has shared an emotional message from his balcony in Kiev.
I want to go back home, and I realize that I have the way to. You know, I realize that I have a different passport, and my family is far away.
This is a dance champion, choreographer and instructor who is widely known as one of the professional dancers in the series Dancing with the Stars. And this is Hostomel, a small town near the capital. A resident has shared a video of his apartment, an apartment which used to be a home, now destroyed and reduced to rubble after a Russian attack. A baby stroller with a doll can be seen, covered in dust.
Ось и пришел русский мир.
Another resident from the same town has shared a video of helicopters flying over homes. Smoke can be seen rising after what appeared to be shots fired. Russian soldiers can be seen from inside a vehicle. The location appears to be outside the Hostomel airport. This is Kharkiv, the second largest city in Ukraine. The population is shaken and residents have taken refuge in an underground metro station. Just under an hour before the video was recorded, a missile hit a residential building, injuring one person.
The shelling started at 5 in the morning. I heard noise and woke up. I realized it sounded like artillery. I jumped from the couch, ran to wake up my mother. I heard explosion behind my back. Something exploded nearby and broke windows. Then small rocks hit me, making me think it was the broken glass. The ambulance drove my neighbor away. He was injured in his leg. I don't know if it was shrapnel or not.
This is another video from the same city. Dozens of people were rushing towards stores to buy drinking water, food, and other essentials. Long lines were also seen outside pharmacies and banks in the northeastern city near the border, after which the local government called on residents to stay home. Some even tried to escape from the city, although rail and road transport and intercity expressways have been cut off. After the first day of shelling and bloodshed, people have reached out to help by donating blood. Around 200 have donated blood already, and given the queues, there are many more people willing to donate in this crisis. A Ukrainian war veteran living in Poland has come back to his homeland. He fought in the war in Donbass and had been living in Wrocław with his wife and 2 children since 2019. Now, after his return, the Ukrainian veteran has a special message for Russia.
I hope I will be back. Russia will be destroyed. That's all. Sorry.
Bureau Report Beyond World is One.
With that, it's a wrap on this edition, but stay tuned to Beyond World is One as we continue to track the latest coming in from Ukraine. This is me, Molly Gambhir, signing off. Thanks for watching.
India's Global Voice, the channel that brings you the biggest stories from across the world.
अरे गया नहीं अभी तक? गाड़ी की सर्विस कब से ड्यू है यार? ये थोड़ी जाएंगे कहीं. ये तो गाड़ी की सर्विस करवाने के लिए कहीं जाने की जरूरत नहीं है. चिल, कोई गड़बड़ नहीं है. गो मैकेनिक पर पाए एक्सपर्ट कार सर्विसेज, 50 पॉइंट इंस्पेक्शन और 3 महीने की अनकंडीशनल वारंटी. डाउनलोड करें इंडिया का नंबर 1 कार सर्विसेज ऐप गो मैकेनिक. गो मैकेनिक. अरे गया नहीं अभी तक? गाड़ी की सर्विस कब से ड्यू है यार? ये थोड़ी जाएंगे कहीं. ये तो गाड़ी की सर्विस करवाने के लिए कहीं जाने की जरूरत नहीं है. चिल, कोई गड़बड़ नहीं है. गो मैकेनिक पर पाए एक्सपर्ट कार सर्विसेज, 50 पॉइंट इंस्पेक्शन और 3 महीने की अनकंडीशनल वारंटी. डाउनलोड करें इंडिया का नंबर 1 कार सर्विसेज ऐप गो मैकेनिक. गो मैकेनिक.
Joe Biden, now the 46th president of the United States, has a full plate in front of him.
Afghanistan has been the heart of American military power.
In a clear warning to China, India's
military has now taken control of the country for 1 year.
What was happening inside the virology lab in Wuhan?
one ship was able to freeze global trade.
We want love, we want peace, we want equality.
There are a traditional recipe, and it's really very delicious.
It's code red for humanity. The alarm bells are deafening. Wildfires, floods, and hurricanes. Extreme climate events warn of impending doom. Is the world heading towards a climate catastrophe? Watch WION's Climate Tracker weekdays at 12 p.m. GMT, 5:30 p.m. IST.
You don't know how to fix the holes in our ozone layer. You don't know how to bring the salmon back up a dead stream. You don't know how to bring back an animal now extinct. And you can't bring back the forest that once grew where there is now a desert.
You have ignored us in the past and you will ignore us again. We have run out of excuses and we are running out of time.
Show us your faithfulness. Show us your trustworthiness. Show us your honesty. Prove us wrong. We desperately need you to prove us wrong. God, help us all